I listen to your questions. I believe that what I'm going to talk about really relates to them, but it will take some thinking as to how we draw the dots, connect the dots and these things. Because I made a list of things here because I really customized my remarks, knowing, you know, all my EO friends, and it's great to have all you Austinites here too. Let me go ahead and get one thing out of the way because it is so important. They asked me, can you teach entrepreneurship? And I really believe that the root of entrepreneurship is curiosity. And you just ask a bunch of good questions, and a lot of curiosity is about asking the right questions. It looks to me like where the action's going to be in the next 20 years is going to be books, records, toys, sporting goods, auto parts, and home improvement. And if I can bring the superstore to one of those, I'll have something. Anyway, and I pick books because I love books and bookstores and always have. And so I'm 6 out of 7 years into this process of studying the bookstore industry, doing what I call my homework, becoming an expert in that industry. And I go to the bookstore convention, and there's a workshop on the future of bookstores in America. This is 1981. And I go and I said, well, this is where they're all going to be talking about the coming of the book superstore. Because I'd already spent 6 years since I decided to do a book superstore, you know, studying it. And to me, it was like a no-brainer that whether I did it or somebody else did it, there are going to be giant bookstores all over, you know, America and probably the world at some point. I realize is the so-called leadership in almost every industry has their head in the sand and doesn't see the future. And what it is a fundamental lack of curiosity. They're so focused on their internal problems and their internal issues, and they just don't have their eyes open. And I see it over and over again. So the main thing that I teach is curiosity, and I'm going to run real fast through, because all these things really relate to the questions you asked. You think hard about it. There are 5 ways that we learn, and it's important to work on all 5 every day. The first way we learn is what I call study, which means reading books, going to classes, watching documentary videos, going to Google, going to Wikipedia, going to a library. There's still a lot of stuff that ain't on the web that's still in old-fashioned books. Going to Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Borders, well, they've got their big sale on while they're liquidating all their stuff in Austin for sure. So that's study, and you think of that as passive, like a one-directional thing, but it shouldn't be. You should be actively engaged. You should be pausing those documentary videos. You should be arguing with those authors. You should be underlining the books. See, I got this little tablet. This is tablet number 174. It's where all my ideas go in. I started that system 12 years ago. And each tablet, well, in New York City, a tablet will last 2 or 3 days. Just hanging out in Austin, the tablet will last like 6 weeks. So it's active studies, number 1. Second way we learn, the way most people learn most of what they know, is conversation. But there's a tendency to converse up, to converse with people that are rich or powerful or whatever. It is every bit as important to converse with workers and poor people and little kids and old people. When I spoke to the YEO at the time chapter in Calcutta, you know, like the chapter president was like, whatever, 36 years old and owned a steel mill or whatever, and he had his driver pick me up at the airport. And I learned a lot talking to the steel mill guy. I learned a lot more talking to his driver. Because, you know, well, what's it like to work for this guy? What's his leadership style? Is your little boy in school? Is your little girl in school? Because for India to live up to its full potential, it has to close that gap, you know, in the educational levels of the men and women there, little boys and little girls. And so study, conversation. The third one, and one they don't teach in business schools, is observation. You walk into any reasonably well-run supermarket, and even if it's closed, you ought to be able to go in there and 30 minutes later come out and tell me the income of the people that shop it, the age structure, the family size, and the ethnicity or race of the people that shop that store. Okay? My class 2 weeks ago, we all went to the biggest shopping mall, Barton Creek Mall. Some of you from Austin. And each person got an assignment. Go out behind Nordstrom's, which is a high-end store, those of you who don't know it, and look at what share of the cars are luxury cars, middle cars, and cheap cars. And then also go out behind the JCPenney, which is a much more affordable store, and look at the mix there. What kind of shoes is everybody in the mall wearing? What kind of watches? Turned out only 15% of the people in the mall that night even had a watch on. 85% were using their cell phones to tell the time. So observation. In fact, tell the students, look, you're in your iPods all the time, and I like iPods, but at least half of my business ideas I would not have if I had not overheard conversations in restaurants. You know, you've got to have your eyes and ears open and be looking around you all the time. So study, conversation, observation. The fourth way, you guys know this one, is experience, which really means experimentation, trial and error. And I work with a lot of nonprofits, and they're all afraid to fail. No, entrepreneurship is all about failure. About how many times you can fail, how fast you can fail, how fast you can learn from it, how fast you can change it and move on. And once in a while you get lucky and you do something right and you do it again. You know, but you still got to watch it because times change, and maybe what worked yesterday won't work today. Maybe what didn't work last year will work. You know, but man, it's not a fear of failure. And you raised that issue, but I would just come back from Portugal, and over there everybody's, oh, we can't fail. If we fail, we'll never do another deal, and we can't fail. Well, then you're not an entrepreneur. Pick something else to do. Go be a lawyer. I don't know. I guess being a failure as a lawyer doesn't work very well, does it? Anyway, so all your customers are in prison. So experimentation, you know, experience, trial and error. And then the fifth way we learn, which at least with the student population also gets left out all the time, is thinking. There's a time when you've heard, talked, observed, seen all this stuff, that you take that and you go off in the woods. I do back road driving in the beautiful Texas Hill Country, whatever works for you, but no phones, cut off all those connections, and really process. I'm also a very visual thinker, so my house is just full of whiteboards. So I'm writing all the time, and then my little tablet, yesterday I was hoping for stoplights on the drive to Houston, so I could do Excel sheets in my little tablet. Anyway, but process it. There's such a tendency to fire before we aim, such a tendency to talk before we think, and it's all very destructive and not entrepreneurial. Now, those methods I urge you to apply to the next things I'm going to talk about. It's not about technology. As I've found going around, there are three great myths about entrepreneurship. One is it's about money. And yet when I study all the great entrepreneurs in history and my heroes and the Walt Disneys and the Fred Smiths and the Steve Jobs and whatever, money is very rarely the driver. Now, there isn't a place for money, and there are times when you're building a business when you need capital, although bootstrapping is bigger and bigger today than ever. It's not about money. It's not about jobs. Last Monday I spoke to the Texas Workforce Commission, or to all these state government people and the people that work with them, contractors trying to create jobs. And there's never been a great enterprise created because somebody wanted to create jobs. Not that jobs aren't important, and not that jobs aren't a byproduct of successful entrepreneurship, just like money can be. And it's not about technology. We are so obsessed with technology. In fact, one of the books I bought, it's in this one. I can't believe this is out 3 years ago. I just discovered it. The Venturesome Economy by a Columbia professor. He's a guy who knows more about how companies are started. His big book was called The Origin and Evolution of New Businesses back in 2000. But I was reading this book late last night, The Venturesome Economy. He's talking about world trade, China and India, and technology. And he uses the term technology fetishists. That all over the world, technology nationalists and technology fetishists, the people that believe we should have more people who study science and math, and that's the key to the future. He went and did research on, he interviewed the CEOs of 106 venture-backed high-growth startups and analyzed both their role, the global, how they were dealing with China and India, but also the role of science. And it doesn't take much research, you didn't have to read his book, to know that while the U.S. may not be tops in the world, maybe 30th or 40th or whatever it is in high schooler scores in math and science, we still have not only a lot more Nobel Prizes in science than any country in the world, but we have more per capita. And in fact, one of the things, another professor just emailed me the stuff, and I haven't had a chance to look at it because I asked him for his evidence, and it's from the OECD, you know, the big, like the UN kind of thing for economics. Anyway, and the average U.S. high school kid, if you ask them about their confidence, they're something like 75% on a 100-point scale. The average South Korean kid at the same age is like 25%. Now, so they're outscoring on the math and science, but they don't have the drive or their confidence in their ability to achieve something. Without getting into national differences, I mean, the thing is, an obsession with technology leads us in the wrong direction because all it's about is about people. Thing there, at least I teach my students, I believe entrepreneurship is both a very introverted and an extroverted process. When I developed Bookstop, I spent half my time walking in the woods dreaming up Gary Hoover's dream bookstore, laying it out in my head, doing floor plans. It was for me and just for me. I spent the other half of my time talking about my idea to every person I met at a party, every stranger on an airplane. What kind of bookstores do you like? Where do you buy books? Where did you used to buy books? What do you like in a bookstore? What don't you like in a bookstore? And only when I could integrate my personal, passionate vision with real people's real needs, did I have something? And again, Jobs is the ultimate case of that. You know, there's stuff going around saying, oh, he never listens to customers. It's totally out of his head. Well, bullshit. I mean, you know, yes, it is out of his head, but that's a guy who really understands what it's like to be a customer, gets in their head. And going back to the customers, because the answers to all those technology questions are, well, what do people really need? And when do they need technology and when do they not? And how does it work for them? And the only way to understand that is to deeply, seriously care about people and what they have to say and what they think. And like all these people using online surveys, no, you're not. I mean, I've done a lot of surveys, but I want to be on the phone, and because you say, well, what do you think of this idea? Well, it's okay. Oh, I think that'd be okay. You're not going to get that when you get the computer. Are you with me? You know, only when you hear them, only when you look them in the eye if you can, or hear them on the phone, or whatever, only when you really touch the data and make it human, do you understand, well, those are two different okays. And you can't do that unless you really care about people. You can never fake it, you know? I mean, and people see right through it. People are smart. People are better educated than ever. And so putting the people first and thinking about them. And people always come to me with their business ideas, and I say, okay, there's only 3 questions here I want to know. You got your idea. And they're always shocked because I never say, no, that'll never work. I see all these entrepreneur business plan competitions I'm always judging, and all the other judges are like, ah, it'll never work. And I'm like, I can't tell you whether it'll work or not. 90% of the people in the world, if they'd seen a business idea on Twitter, they'd say it will never work. Entrepreneurs cannot judge other entrepreneurs' ideas. A little better in your own category, maybe. But it's such a personal vision. But what I can do is teach people how to evaluate their own ideas and come to their own conclusion about whether it works. And so there's 3 questions I got. A is, do people really need it? Do people really want or need? And that's tricky. People don't always know what they want. Henry Ford said, if I'd given the customers what they wanted, I would have given them a faster horse. So sometimes you've got to extrapolate, read between the lines, but that comes from deep, caring knowledge about the customer. So do people really need it? Do you really love it? Is it your passion? Because if you don't have a passion for it, it ain't happening. And then is anybody else doing it? If you are going to do something, you don't need to be doing something somebody else is doing. But maybe they aren't doing it well. Maybe they aren't doing it in your style. Maybe they're doing it in a different country and you're going to do it in a different state or country. Those are all fine. But if somebody, you know, I can't tell you how many people come and say, oh, I want to start a fast food chain that sells healthy hamburgers. So what do you think of, you know, Paul Terry, Pete Terry, and or whatever, Terra Burger or whatever that's in Austin. And they say, well, why do you mean? I've never heard of it, you know. Well, you better go do your homework. With anything, you find ways, you don't try to master your weaknesses or say, oh, I don't shoot good basketball, I'll learn. Yeah, you're always learning, but you take your strengths and run along with them and focus on them. And for your weaknesses, you hire people that are good at them, you know. Sometimes you got to learn them yourself. And when I say hire, they may be on the payroll, they may not. There have been times when my lawyer or my accountant was every bit as important, you know, outside lawyer, outside accountant was every bit as important as somebody who was on the payroll. And maybe made as much money, but, you know, or maybe didn't. But there are a lot of ways to get resources or outsource the activity, although you don't want to outsource anything that's core to your business, that's key to your relationship with your customers. But so the thing, and then you got to love it. I mean, if you find yourself, and man, you hate managing 80 people, well, you're really going to hate managing 100, and it's either time to sell it or turn it over to somebody else or restructure your role. And, you know, maybe go back. And I mean, that's the thing they asked me, well, when I lost all my money on my 3rd venture, how did I have the courage to get up and start number 4? I said, well, I didn't have any choice. I'm not employable. I couldn't work for anybody else and nobody would want to hire me, you know. I do startups, you know. So time to go back to the drawing board. It's going to go back to the people. If you can think about the people of the future, you can have a better understanding of the technology of the future. And it's demographics, you know. We know to the penny how many 65-year-olds will live in Austin, Texas 35 years from now, pretty much. Whereas we really don't have a clue whether Dell will even be an independent company a year from now, or where the Dow Jones will be, or the interest rates, right? Whereas you can place bets on demographics. Drucker talks about that at great length. The future that matters is the future that's already here. And the people that win in technology, whether it's IBM in the 60s or Apple today, are the people that are focused on people, you know, and humans, and what do they really need. And sometimes they don't need technology, and sometimes they do. And there's going to be so many opportunities bringing people back together. So, thank you.